It was a stormy evening, and the city lights flickered through sheets of rain that blurred the tall glass windows of the Grand Harmony Hall. Inside, workers rushed across the marble floor, preparing for one of the most prestigious charity galas of the year. The air buzzed with energy. Waiters in black uniforms carried trays of crystal glasses. Decorators adjusted the last of the golden ribbons, and the hall's huge chandelier glowed like 1,000 tiny stars above their heads. Behind the scenes, the event manager paced anxiously. The gala was meant to start in less than an hour, and every detail had to be perfect. This wasn't just any charity event. It was being hosted by a powerful CEO, a man whose presence could make or break reputations. Everyone whispered his name with a mix of respect and fear. He was known for his sharp eyes and colder-than-ice tone when something didn't meet his standards. But tonight something went terribly wrong. In the middle of rehearsals, the pianist, the one who was supposed to perform a special piece for the guests, suddenly collapsed. One moment he was playing, the next his hand slipped from the keys and he fell to the floor. Panic spread instantly. People ran for water, others called for help, and within minutes paramedics arrived and carried him away. The manager stood frozen, clutching his clipboard, watching as the stretcher disappeared through the grand doors. The hall was now filled with uneasy silence. The piano, once alive with music, sat still and quiet under the soft light. The event manager rubbed his forehead, muttering under his breath. There was no backup plan. No one else was prepared to play. The guests were already arriving soon, and the entire night depended on that opening performance. Near the corner of the hall, a cleaner stood quietly with her young daughter. The woman wore a faded uniform, her hair tied neatly under a cap. Her little girl, around 8 years old, held a small bag of snacks and watched the commotion with wide eyes. The mother had taken her along that evening because she couldn't leave her alone at home. The girl's name was Emily. She had always been curious about the piano. Every time her mother brought her along to work, she'd sneak glances at the grand instrument sitting on the stage. She would imagine what it must feel like to touch those shining white and black keys, to fill the whole hall with music that people would listen to in silence. As she watched the adults panic, something stirred inside her. The sound of the rain outside mixed with the faint hum of voices, and the piano seemed to call to her in the middle of the chaos. She tugged on her mother's sleeve and said softly, "Mom, I can play. I can help them." Her mother froze, turning toward her with a look of shock. "What are you saying, Emily? This isn't the time to play games." "I'm not playing," Emily replied in a small but steady voice. "You taught me that song, remember? I can play it." "They need someone." Her mother's heart squeezed painfully. Emily was a bright child, but she was shy and gentle, often afraid to even speak up in front of strangers. The thought of her standing before hundreds of people was unthinkable. She knelt and held her daughter's hands. "Sweetheart, this isn't a place for us. They have real musicians here. You don't have to worry about it." But Emily looked past her mother toward the stage. The event manager was speaking frantically into his phone, his face red with frustration. "No, we can't delay. Do you understand what this means?" "The guests are already on their way." Emily stepped forward. Her small voice broke through the noise. "Excuse me, I can play." For a moment, no one reacted. The manager turned, blinking in confusion. "What did you say?" "I can play the piano," Emily repeated, standing straighter this time. "If you want, I can try." The workers nearby exchanged awkward glances. A few laughed quietly. One of them whispered, "She's just a kid." Another chuckled, "This isn't a school recital." Her mother's face turned red with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry," she said quickly. "She doesn't mean it. She's just nervous." She reached for Emily's hand, but the little girl stepped forward again, her eyes shining with quiet determination. "I really can play," she said. "Please, let me try." The manager looked from the girl to her mother, clearly torn between disbelief and desperation. He rubbed his temples and sighed. "Look, sweetheart, this is a charity gala. There are important people coming." "I don't think—" "Sir?" One of the assistants interrupted, holding a phone. "No one else is available. Every pianist we called is either out of town or already booked." The manager closed his eyes and let out a long breath. "This can't be happening," he muttered. Then he looked at Emily again. She stood there patiently, waiting, her hands clasped in front of her. There was something about her calmness that made him pause. He crouched slightly to meet her eye level. "All right," he said carefully. You say you can play. What song do you know? Emily thought for a moment. The one my mom taught me. She said it's a very special song. It makes people feel warm inside. Her mother's eyes filled with tears. That song was something she had learned years ago, from someone she had once loved deeply, someone she never spoke about anymore. It was a piece that held too many memories. The manager hesitated, but then he looked at the clock. Time was running out. He finally nodded. Fine, you can try one song, just one. If it sounds good, we'll let you play when the guests arrive. If not, we'll figure something out, the workers murmured in disbelief. Some shook their heads, but no one stopped him. Emily climbed the few steps to the stage, her heart beating so loudly she could hear it in her ears. The piano stood before her like something out of a dream. Its polished surface reflected the golden lights above. She took a deep breath, her small hands trembling slightly. Her mother stood near the edge of the stage, watching anxiously. She wanted to run and stop her, to take her away before anyone could laugh at her, but something held her still. Maybe it was the way Emily's face looked so calm, so sure. Emily pressed the first key, a soft note that echoed through the empty hall. It sounded pure, gentle, like the whisper of rain outside. She pressed another, then another, and soon a melody began to take shape. The workers stopped moving. The manager turned slowly, his phone lowering from his ear. It wasn't perfect. Her fingers were small and she made tiny mistakes. But the feeling in her music was something else entirely. It was tender and honest, like the sound of a child's heart speaking without words. The notes floated through the hall, filling every corner with warmth. The rain outside softened, almost as if listening. Her mother's eyes filled with tears as she watched her daughter play the song that once comforted her through long, lonely nights. The same melody that used to echo faintly from a distant memory now came alive through the hands of her little girl. When Emily finally stopped, the last note lingered in the air for a few seconds before fading. The hall was silent again. Not the uneasy silence from before, but a quiet full of awe. The manager slowly clapped once, then twice. That was incredible, he said softly. The others joined, hesitant at first, then with real admiration. Even the decorators and waiters who had stopped to listen found themselves smiling. Emily looked up, surprised. Did I do okay? She asked in a tiny voice. The manager nodded. You did more than okay. He turned to his team. All right, everyone, we're keeping her. Get her a proper seat on the stage. We're out of options, and honestly, I think we've just found our miracle. Emily's mother covered her mouth with her hand, unable to believe what she was hearing. Her daughter, the little girl who used to practice on an old broken keyboard at home, was going to play in front of the city's most powerful people. As the hall came back to life with movement and noise, Emily sat quietly at the piano, her fingers tracing the keys. She didn't feel nervous anymore. Somehow she felt like she belonged there, like the piano had been waiting for her all along. Outside, the storm began to clear, and the first hint of moonlight touched the glass dome of the hall. Inside, the little girl in the cleaner's uniform waited patiently for her moment, not knowing that her simple act of courage was about to change everything, not just for her, but for the man who would soon walk through those grand doors and hear the song that would move him to tears. The hall glowed with golden light as the guests began to arrive, stepping out of sleek black cars and walking under umbrellas held by attendants. The storm had finally passed, leaving the city soaked but calm. Inside the grand hall, the air was filled with the soft hum of conversations, the clinking of glasses and the sound of camera flashes. Everyone was dressed in their finest, elegant dresses, tailored suits, and expensive smiles. Behind the scenes, the workers whispered nervously. They knew what was about to happen, and many of them still couldn't believe it. The little girl, the cleaner's daughter, was actually going to play the piano in front of the CEO and hundreds of guests. Some thought it was a brave move. Others worried it might turn into a disaster. The event manager stood near the side of the stage, wiping his hands with a handkerchief. He kept glancing at his watch, then at the door. All right, he muttered. Everything needs to go perfectly. One mistake and we're all in trouble. He looked toward the piano where the little girl sat quietly, her small legs dangling from the velvet seat. Her mother stood close by, helping her adjust the height of the stool. Are you sure you want to do this? Her mother whispered softly, her voice trembling with worry. The little girl nodded, her eyes steady. Yes, Mom, I'm not scared. Her mother smiled weakly, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead. Just remember what we practiced. Don't rush. Play from your heart." The girl nodded again and looked down at her hands. She could feel her fingers tingling with excitement. The piano keys looked like tiny waves of light under the stage lamps. She took a slow breath, trying to calm herself. The main doors opened wide and a tall man walked in. His presence seemed to fill the room instantly. He was the CEO, the host of the evening, known for his quiet power and serious face. Everyone straightened when he entered. Waiters stopped talking and the manager quickly hurried over to greet him. The man gave polite nods to a few people but said very little. He walked with purpose, his eyes sharp and unreadable. He had attended countless events like this before, but tonight felt strangely heavy. Maybe it was the song that was supposed to be played. A song written years ago, one that held memories he rarely allowed himself to revisit. He had requested it personally, not knowing that the musician who was meant to play it had fallen ill. As he took his seat at the front, the lights dimmed slightly. The audience hushed. The manager stepped on stage and spoke into the microphone, his voice steady though his hands were trembling behind the podium. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We thank you for joining us tonight for this special charity gala. We have a small change in our program this evening. Due to an unexpected emergency, our main pianist could not perform. However," he hesitated for a second, unsure how to explain what was coming next. "However, we have a surprise guest who will be sharing something truly heartfelt with us." A few whispers rippled through the crowd. "A surprise guest?" someone murmured. "Who?" another asked. The manager smiled stiffly and gestured toward the piano. "Please welcome our young performer." The spotlight shifted and there she was, the little girl sitting alone at the grand piano. The guests blinked in confusion. A child. Many exchanged puzzled looks. Some chuckled softly, assuming it was a light-hearted moment before the main event. Others simply stared, curious to see what would happen next. Her mother stood behind the curtain, her heart beating so fast it hurt. She whispered a silent prayer, hoping that her daughter wouldn't freeze under all those watchful eyes. The little girl didn't look at anyone. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, then took a deep breath. Her small hands hovered over the keys, and then she began to play. The first note rang through the air, soft, gentle, like a whisper of wind. Then came another and another, weaving together into a tender melody that slowly filled the room. The sound was pure and fragile, yet it carried something deep, a feeling that seemed to touch everyone in the hall. At first, people were polite. They listened out of courtesy, but within seconds their expressions changed. The laughter stopped. The whispers faded. Every eye turned toward the piano. The child's fingers moved gracefully, her body swaying slightly as she played. There was no fear in her movements and only honesty. The song told a story. It spoke of love, loss, and hope without using a single word. It felt familiar, as if it came from a memory everyone had forgotten but suddenly remembered. Some of the guests found themselves moved in ways they couldn't explain. A few even wiped their eyes quietly, surprised by the emotions rising inside them. The CEO, sitting at the front, froze. The melody struck something deep within him, a sound he hadn't heard in years. His heart pounded. His mind flashed with images of another time, another place. A woman sitting by a piano, humming softly while holding a baby in her arms. The same melody, the same rhythm. He leaned forward slightly, his breath catching. "Impossible," he whispered under his breath. No one else could have known this song. It wasn't published. It wasn't recorded. It was something private, something only he and his wife had shared. His hands clenched tightly together as the music continued. The little girl played with her whole soul, and with each passing second the CEO felt as if the walls of his heart were breaking open. The pain, the memories, the regrets, all of it returned. The mother behind the curtain felt tears running down her face. She remembered the night she sang that song to her daughter before bed, not realizing that one day it would lead her here, in front of the very man she had once loved and lost. When the final note came, it lingered in the air like a sigh. The room stayed silent for several seconds after the music stopped. It was as if no one dared to breathe. Then slowly people began to clap, softly at first, then louder and louder until the sound filled the hall. The little girl looked up, surprised by the applause. Her cheeks flushed with warmth. She smiled shyly and gave a small nod before sliding off the stool. The manager was stunned. He had expected an awkward performance, but what he had just heard was beyond words. He quickly stepped forward and whispered to her, "That was amazing. You were incredible." The guests were still clapping when the CEO suddenly stood up. Everyone turned toward him. He walked slowly to the stage, his face pale, his eyes wet. The little girl froze when she saw him approaching. She didn't know who he was, but there was something gentle in the way he looked at her. He reached the stage and stopped a few feet away. For a moment he couldn't speak. He looked at the piano, then back at her. "Where did you learn that song?" he asked quietly. The girl blinked, unsure how to respond. "My mom taught me," she said softly. "She said it's special. She used to play it when I was little." The man's lips parted slightly and he stepped closer. "Your mom?" he repeated. His heart pounded as 1,000 thoughts rushed through his mind. "Is she here?" The girl nodded and pointed toward the curtain where her mother stood frozen, her eyes wide and full of emotion. The crowd turned as the woman slowly stepped forward, her hands trembling. The man's expression changed as soon as he saw her. For a second, it was as if the world stopped moving. Recognition hit him like a wave. The same eyes, the same face. Time had passed, but he would have known her anywhere. She looked back at him, speechless, her heart breaking all over again. The years apart vanished in an instant, replaced by the memory of the life they once shared, the home, the laughter, the baby they both loved. The hall grew quiet again. No one spoke. The guests looked at each other, realizing they were witnessing something deeply personal, something beyond the music or the event. The CEO took another step forward, his voice low but full of emotion. "That song, she used to play it for me. You remember?" The woman nodded slowly, her tears falling freely now.
"Yes," she whispered.
"I remember." The little girl looked between them, confused but sensing something important. "Do you know my mom?" she asked innocently. The man's voice broke as he answered, "Yes, more than you can imagine." The audience sat in stunned silence, feeling the weight of the moment. They didn't know the full story, not yet, but they could feel the truth in the air. The music that had just filled the hall wasn't just a performance. It was a bridge between two hearts that had been broken, and a child who had unknowingly brought them together again. The manager quietly lowered the microphone, realizing this was no longer about the gala. This was something real, something far more powerful than any speech or donation could ever be. As the little girl stood between them, still clutching her sheet of music, the man's eyes softened. For the first time in years, he felt hope return. The melody still echoed faintly in the air like a promise, that no matter how much time passes, love can find its way back through the simplest purr. The room was filled with a silence so heavy that even the soft hum of the lights seemed to fade away. No one spoke. No one dared to move. The man on the stage, the powerful CEO everyone feared, stood only a few steps away from the woman and the little girl who had just changed everything with a single song. His usually calm face looked uncertain, almost fragile. The guests watched, holding their breath, not fully understanding what they were witnessing but feeling the weight of it all. The woman, still dressed in her cleaner's uniform, stood frozen. Her hands trembled as she tried to hold back her tears. She hadn't expected this. She had lived for years in the shadows, working quietly, never wanting to be seen, never wanting the past to catch up with her. But now here it was, standing right in front of her. The man she had once loved deeply and the father of the child who had just played the song that connected them again. The little girl looked between them with confusion. She could sense something strong happening, something bigger than herself, but she didn't know what it was. She held her mother's hand tightly and whispered, "Mom, why are you crying?" Her mother forced a smile, though her lips trembled. "It's nothing, sweetheart. I'm just happy you played so beautifully." The man took a small step closer, his voice low, almost breaking. "It's been years," he said softly. "I thought I'd never see you again." The woman blinked back tears, her throat tightening. "I never planned this," she whispered. "I didn't want to cause a scene. I only came here to work. She just wanted to help when the pianist fell sick." He looked down at the little girl, his expression softening. "She plays beautifully," he said quietly. "That song, she played it exactly the way her mother used to." The woman's heart ached at his words. "I taught it to her," she admitted. "She always loved it, even though she never knew where it came from." The man stared at the child, his eyes wet with tears he didn't bother to hide. She doesn't know? The woman shook her head slowly. No, she whispered. I never told her. I didn't know how. I didn't want her to grow up in pain or confusion. For a moment he couldn't speak. He just stood there looking at the little girl who was watching him curiously, holding her mother's hand like a lifeline. She reminded him so much of someone, the same eyes, the same soft expression. His heart clenched as he realized what his mind had already begun to accept. He crouched down slowly so that he was at the little girl's height. You play very well, he said gently. Who taught you to love music? The girl smiled shyly. My mom, she said. She says music makes people feel things they can't say out loud. He nodded, trying to keep his composure. She's right about that. His voice shook slightly. What's your name, sweetheart? Emily, she replied proudly. The man felt his chest tighten. The name echoed in his mind like a bell. Emily. It was the name they had chosen years ago, before everything fell apart, before they lost each other. His eyes closed for a second as memories flooded back. The night they sat together, hands over her stomach, choosing that name because it meant hope. When he opened his eyes again, he looked straight at the woman. She couldn't meet his gaze. Her face was pale, her eyes full of fear and guilt. She whispered, I had to leave. You know why? He stood up slowly, still shaken. I searched for you, he said quietly. For years. There were no answers. I thought you were gone. I thought... He stopped himself, his voice cracking. I didn't know you were raising her alone. Her lips trembled. I didn't want to make things harder for you, she said. Back then, everything was falling apart. Your company, your family, the press. I couldn't stay. I wanted her to grow up away from all that noise. The guests sat silently, watching the scene unfold like a movie. Some of them glanced at each other, whispering softly, but most simply listened, their hearts caught between disbelief and empathy. The man nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. And all this time, he said, you were here, working quietly, cleaning the floors of the same places where I gave speeches, never once letting me see you. She looked down, ashamed. I didn't think you'd care anymore. He took a slow breath, his voice trembling. How could I not? He turned his gaze back to Emily. She's my daughter. The little girl blinked in surprise. What? She whispered. Her mother knelt beside her quickly, holding her close. Sweetheart, she said softly. Remember the stories I told you about your dad? The man who loved music like you do? Emily nodded slowly, her wide eyes turning toward the man. That's him? Her mother nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. Yes, the man couldn't hold back anymore. He knelt and opened his arms. Emily hesitated for a moment, looking up at her mother for reassurance. When her mother nodded, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. He held her tightly, his body shaking. For a long moment, no one moved. The entire hall seemed frozen in time. The chandeliers glimmered softly, the piano stood quiet, and the rain outside tapped gently against the windows. People in the audience wiped their eyes. It didn't matter that they didn't know the full story. What they saw was enough. A father finding his daughter again through a melody. It was something pure, something real. After what felt like forever, the man gently pulled back and looked at Emily. You have her smile, he said quietly. And her heart. Emily looked confused but happy. You like my song? She asked innocently. He smiled through his tears. I loved it, he said. It's the most beautiful thing I've heard in my life. Her mother stepped closer, uncertain. I didn't mean for this to happen, she whispered. I just wanted to work to keep her safe. I didn't want to bring back the past, he shook his head. Sometimes the past finds us when it's ready, he said. And maybe this time it's not here to hurt us. The manager finally stepped forward quietly. Sir, would you like us to continue the program? He asked carefully. The man turned to him, then shook his head slowly. No, he said. This is the moment people will remember. Let's keep it that way. He looked at the audience, then back at Emily and her mother. Tonight, he said softly, I was reminded of what this event was meant to be about. Compassion, hope, and second chances. Sometimes they don't come in the form we expect. The audience clapped again, but it wasn't the polite applause of earlier. It was warm, real, full of feeling. People stood up one by one, moved by what they had seen. Some of them had tears in their eyes. As the noise filled the room, Emily looked up at her father and whispered, "Can I play one more song? For you?" He smiled and nodded. "Yes, please. Play it for us." She climbed back onto the piano stool, her little hands finding the keys again. This time she didn't feel nervous. She looked at her parents standing side by side and felt something she had never felt before: wholeness. Her fingers began to dance on the keys once more, creating a gentle tune that seemed to wrap around the room like a warm blanket. It wasn't the same song as before. It was simpler, softer, a song of reunion, of love rediscovered. The man slipped his arm around the woman's shoulders, and for the first time in years, she didn't pull away. They stood together, watching their daughter fill the hall with light. Outside, the last drops of rain slid down the windows as the city lights shimmered. Inside, time seemed to slow. Every person in the room could feel the quiet magic that had just unfolded. Not a story of wealth or fame, but of a little girl whose music had reminded everyone that even broken hearts could find their way back home. When the final note faded, the applause came again, louder, stronger, full of joy. Emily turned around and smiled, her eyes shining under the bright lights. Her mother clapped proudly, her heart finally at peace. The man wiped his tears, whispering softly, "You've given me back everything I lost." And as they stood there, a family once torn apart, now reunited by a child's courage and the sound of a piano, it felt like the start of something new. The night that had begun with panic and fear had turned into a moment that no one in that grand hall would ever forget. The hall seemed to hold its breath as the little girl's fingers continued to move across the piano keys. Her melody was soft and gentle, like a river flowing quietly through a forest, yet there was a strength in it that no one could ignore. The audience had gone completely silent, completely captivated. Some leaned forward in their seats, others closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. The CEO stood beside the little girl, still holding her mother's hand lightly. He could barely believe what was happening. The melody she was playing now wasn't just beautiful, it was familiar. Every note seemed to reach directly into his chest, stirring memories he had long tried to push away. He remembered a time years ago, sitting in a similar hall with the woman now at his side. She had played that very melody on a smaller piano in a tiny living room, and he had promised then that he would never let go of her. But life had taken them on separate paths, and he had lost both her and the child they had loved together. The little girl's mother watched from the side, tears streaming down her face. She had thought she had protected her daughter from a complicated past, but now she realized that Emily's music had brought them all together in a way she had never imagined. It was more than talent. It was a language of the heart. As the melody grew richer and more confident, the CEO remembered how it had felt the first time he had heard it years ago. There had been a night when the woman had sat at the piano, holding her hands over her stomach, softly humming to the life growing inside her. He remembered the gentle way she had encouraged him to listen, the promise in her voice that no matter what happened, love would always remain. The music now seemed to carry that same promise, bridging the years that had separated them. The little girl didn't look at the audience. She didn't need to. She played for the one person she instinctively felt connected to, the father she had never met, yet somehow knew was a part of her. Each note seemed to carry a question, a hope, a silent plea for recognition and love. The CEO took a step closer, unable to resist the pull of the music. He wanted to reach out, to touch the piano keys, to connect with her in some way. He knelt slightly so he could be closer to her level, and as he listened, tears slipped down his cheeks without warning. It was a sound he had longed to hear for years, a sound that reminded him of the family he had thought he had lost forever. Around them, the guests had become more than spectators. They were witnesses to something extraordinary, something that went far beyond a charity gala or a social gathering. They were seeing a miracle unfold in real time. A family reunited through a child's music, a melody that had survived years of separation and sorrow. Some of the guests whispered quietly to one another, unable to fully express what they were feeling. Others simply sat in silence, letting the music speak for itself. The little girl's mother finally stepped closer to the stage, her heart pounding. She had watched Emily play countless times at home, but this was different. The room was filled with hundreds of people, all of whom could hear her daughter. Yet Emily played as if she were alone in her room. There was a confidence in her that her mother had never seen before. It was as if the piano itself had recognized her, as if it was welcoming her presence after all those years. "Mom," Emily whispered softly during a pause in the music. "Do you think he remembers me?" Her mother looked down at her daughter, her voice trembling. "I think he does," she said. "He's listening, and I can see it in his eyes." The CEO finally spoke, his voice low but steady, carrying a weight of emotion. "She has your eyes," he said quietly, looking down at Emily. "And your heart. I see pieces of both of you in her, pieces I never thought I'd see again." The little girl paused for a moment, glancing up at him. She didn't fully understand, but she felt something warm and safe in his voice, something familiar, even though she had never known him before. She pressed her small fingers to the keys again, continuing the melody, this time with a smile. The music changed subtly now, growing more joyful, more hopeful. It was as if Emily sensed the shift in the room, the connection being formed between her parents. She was telling them a story without words, a story of reunion, forgiveness, and love. The melody seemed to flow from her heart, straight into the hearts of everyone listening. The CEO's mind wandered back to the moments he had missed, the birthdays, the quiet mornings, the small milestones he had longed to witness. And yet, listening to his daughter play, he realized that those moments weren't lost forever. They were still possible. This music was proof of that. Her mother wiped her tears and stepped closer, finally embracing the CEO gently, allowing the years of separation to melt away. They didn't speak at first, letting the music fill the space between them. It was a conversation without words, a communication only hearts could understand. The little girl played on, completely unaware of the impact she was having on the room. She didn't know that the CEO's chest ached with emotion, that her mother's hands shook with relief and joy, or that the guests were witnessing a moment they would never forget. She simply played because the piano asked her to, because it had been waiting for her all along. As the final notes began to fade, the CEO took a deep breath and stepped closer to the piano. "Emily," he said softly, "that was incredible. You've given me something I never thought I'd have again." The little girl looked up at him, her eyes shining with curiosity and pride. "Did you like it?" she asked. He smiled, his own tears falling freely now. "I loved it," he said. "More than you can imagine." The mother joined them, placing her hands on both of their shoulders. "I never wanted her to be alone," she said. "I wanted her to grow up safe, happy, and loved." And now, she trailed off, unable to find words. The CEO nodded, his voice full of emotion. "And now she has both of us," he said. Finally. The audience erupted into applause again, louder this time, more heartfelt. Some of the guests were crying openly. Others were smiling, their hearts touched by the scene unfolding before them. It wasn't just a musical performance anymore. It was a story of lost and found love, a family reunited in the most unexpected way. Emily stood up from the piano stool, smiling shyly at the audience. She looked at her parents and felt a warmth she had never known before. She had always loved music, but now she understood that it could do more than just make people happy. It could heal, connect, and bring people back together. Her mother took her hand and whispered, "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. You did more than play the piano tonight. You brought us back together." The CEO crouched down to Emily's level and hugged her tightly. "You've given me back my family," he said softly, "and for that I will never forget you." As they stood together, the little girl between her parents, the hall seemed to shimmer with something more than light and music. It was filled with hope, love, and the promise of new beginnings. People in the audience whispered to one another, knowing they had just witnessed something extraordinary. A family reunited through the courage and talent of a little girl who had dared to play the piano when the world seemed to be in chaos. The night continued, but for the CEO, the mother, and Emily, the gala no longer mattered. The applause, the cameras, the speeches, all of it faded into the background. What mattered was the family they had found again, the bond that had been restored through music, and the little girl who had unknowingly brought them back together. Outside, the city sparkled under a clear sky, the storm long gone. Inside, the hall was alive with emotion, a quiet celebration of love rediscovered. And at the center of it all, Emily sat at the piano once more, her small hands moving gently across the keys, creating music that was more than sound. It was a bridge between hearts, a gift that would forever change the lives of those who had been touched by it. The CEO looked at his daughter, then at her mother, and whispered, "This is only the beginning." Emily smiled, sensing the truth in his words. She had no idea how far-reaching her music would go, but she knew one thing for certain. For the first time in her young life, her family was whole. And that was worth more than anything in the world. The piano notes lingered in the hall, soft and full of promise, a reminder that even after years of separation, love can find its way back and hearts can heal when given the chance. And in that moment, everyone in the hall felt it, a quiet, unspoken magic that only music, courage, and love combined can create. The hall had fallen into a quiet reverence. Even the soft clinking of glasses and faint footsteps of the staff seemed to pause as everyone turned to watch the little girl who had transformed the evening into something far beyond a typical gala. She stood beside the piano now, her small hands still tingling from the music she had just played, yet she seemed at peace. The music had not only bridged years of separation between her parents, but it had also created a space where emotions could finally breathe freely. The CEO stood a few steps away, his eyes fixed on his daughter, and yet they kept drifting to her mother, who now stood beside him. The years of misunderstandings, separation, and silent longing seemed to dissolve in that single moment. For so long he had believed that the past was gone, that there was no way to recover what had been lost. Yet here they were, a family reunited, brought together by something as simple and profound as music. The mother took a deep breath and finally spoke, her voice soft but steady. "I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to hurt you or confuse her or bring the past back into our lives." The CEO nodded slowly, understanding in his eyes. "I know," he said gently. "I know you were trying to protect her. I can see that now. But she's here. We're here. And maybe that's what matters the most." The little girl looked between them, trying to understand the weight in their voices. She had always felt that music could communicate feelings words could not, and now she saw that it was true. Her song had carried not only her own emotions but also the emotions of the people who loved her. She had spoken through the piano in a way that had allowed her parents to reconnect, and now they were here, together. The CEO took a tentative step forward and gently placed a hand on the mother's shoulder. "It's strange, isn't it?" he said softly. "After all these years, we find ourselves here in the same room with our daughter bringing us back together." She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "It is strange," she admitted, "but it's also beautiful." The little girl smiled, sensing the tenderness between them. She stepped closer to the piano again, as if wanting to show them that her music could still hold their attention and help them communicate what had been unsaid for so many years. Her fingers hovered above the keys, and when she began to play again, it was not the same song she had played earlier. This melody was lighter, more playful, filled with hope and possibility. It was a song of beginnings, of promises yet to be kept, and of the love that had always existed, even if it had been hidden for a long time. The audience watched in awe. Many of them were still guests at the gala, yet they could feel the personal significance of what was unfolding before them. They could see that this was not a performance for applause or recognition. It was a gift from a child to her parents, a gift of connection, healing, and love. Some people in the audience wiped tears from their eyes quietly, unable to look away. Others leaned forward, captivated by the raw honesty of the moment. The mother placed a hand over her heart, her gaze fixed on Emily as she played. "You've always had a gift," she whispered softly. "But tonight you've done something more than play music. You've brought us together." The CEO knelt down beside his daughter, resting a hand on her small shoulder. "You don't even realize what you've done," he said gently. "You've reminded me that love can survive anything, that even when it seems lost, it can find its way back if we listen with our hearts." Emily's eyes sparkled. She didn't fully understand all the words he was saying, but she understood the feeling. Her father's presence, his warmth, and his attention made her feel seen in a way she had never felt before. She had always loved the piano, but now she realized that her music could create something much bigger. It could create connection, hope, and healing. The audience began to whisper among themselves, captivated by the story that was unfolding. People were no longer thinking about the gala, the donations, or the formalities. They were thinking about the little girl who had courageously played the piano and, in doing so, had brought a family back together. Some guests quietly admitted to one another that they had never experienced anything like this before. Others felt a stirring of emotion they could not fully describe, a sense that they had witnessed something magical and real. The CEO stood up and looked at his daughter and the woman beside her. He felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility, a deep desire to make up for the lost years. "We have a lot of time to make up for," he said quietly. "Time that was lost, moments we didn't share. But we have each other now, and that's what matters." The mother nodded, a gentle smile on her face. "We do," she said. "And it's because of her," she added, glancing at Emily, "that we found our way back." Emily's small hands finished the final notes of her new melody, and the hall filled with soft applause. This time it was not polite or reserved. It was heartfelt, genuine, and full of appreciation for the courage and love that had been on display. The little girl smiled shyly, bowing her head slightly. She felt proud not for herself but for the happiness she could see blooming between her parents. The CEO walked over to the piano, kneeling once more beside Emily. "Thank you," he said softly. "You've done something no one else could. You've reminded me what's truly important. Not work, not events, not recognition, but family, love, connection." Her mother stepped forward, wrapping her arms around both of them in a gentle embrace. "We've all been through so much," she said, "but now we can start again, together." Emily leaned into her father, feeling the warmth of his embrace and the gentle steadiness of her mother beside her. For the first time, she felt truly safe, truly loved, and truly part of something bigger than herself. She realized that her music had not only expressed her own feelings, but had also acted as a bridge, bringing her family back together in a way words never could. The guests began to rise slowly, some wiping tears from their eyes, others holding hands with loved ones nearby. They felt privileged to witness such an intimate and heartfelt reunion. The hall, once filled with nervous anticipation for a gala, now pulsed with quiet joy and wonder. People whispered among themselves, talking about courage, hope, and the power of love, expressed through something as simple as a melody. The CEO finally spoke again, addressing the audience. "Tonight you may have come for a gala, for music, or for charity, but what we have witnessed together is far greater than any event. We have seen that love, courage, and honesty can heal wounds that seemed impossible. We have seen that even when life separates us, it can also bring us back together in the most unexpected ways." The mother held Emily's hand tightly, looking into her daughter's eyes. "You've given us something no one can ever take away," she said. "A second chance." The little girl smiled, feeling the warmth of her parents' love surround her. She didn't fully understand the complexities of the past or the weight of their separation, but she understood this moment. She understood that her music had made a difference. She understood that love, patience, and courage could bring people back to each other, no matter how long they had been apart. The CEO turned to the audience one last time, a gentle smile on his face. "I hope that what you have seen tonight reminds each of us to cherish the people we love, to listen with our hearts, and to never underestimate the power of a small act, even the act of a child playing a simple song, to change everything." Emily's fingers rested lightly on the piano keys. She had finished playing, but the magic of her music lingered in the hall. Every person present felt it, a warmth and connection that went far beyond the notes themselves. The melody had done more than fill a room with sound. It had filled hearts with hope, love, and the promise of new beginnings. Her mother and father stood on either side of her, holding her hands gently. "We'll never be apart again," the CEO whispered. "I promise." Emily smiled, finally understanding that her song had not only reunited her family, but it also opened a door to a future full of love and togetherness. She realized that her courage to play, even when she was nervous, had made all the difference. The gala continued around them, but for the family at the piano, time seemed to stand still. They stood together, a little girl, her mother, and her father, a family reunited, hearts mended and a bond strengthened by music, courage, and love. And in that hall, filled with hundreds of people, the truth was clear. Sometimes the simplest acts, a melody played by a small, brave heart, and can change lives, heal wounds, and remind us all of the importance of family and connection. The CEO, the mother, and the little girl all knew that nothing would ever be the same again. And yet, in the most beautiful way, everything had become exactly as it should be. The gala had begun to wind down, but the air in the hall was still heavy with emotion. The guests were talking quietly among themselves, many still reflecting on the extraordinary moment they had witnessed. Some had taken photos, others had tried to capture the memory in their minds, but no one could truly put into words what had just happened. A small girl with a love for music had reunited a family, healed old wounds, and reminded everyone present of the power of courage, hope, and love. The little girl, still holding her parents' hands, looked up at them with a sense of wonder. She didn't fully understand everything that had happened, but she knew it was important. She had played the piano when it mattered the most, and she had seen her mother and father come together in a way she had only dreamed about. Her heart was full, and for the first time in her life she felt truly part of a family that belonged together. The CEO knelt down beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "You were amazing tonight," he said softly. "Not just because of the music, but because of your courage. You reminded us all what really matters." Emily smiled shyly. "I just wanted to help," she said quietly. "I didn't know it would make so much difference." Her mother squeezed her hand gently. "Sometimes the smallest acts can change everything," she said. "You showed us that tonight." The CEO stood and looked around the hall. The guests were beginning to leave, still buzzing with whispers about what they had witnessed. He felt a deep sense of gratitude. The night had been meant for charity, for speeches, and for applause, but it had become something far greater. It had become a night of healing, reunion, and the beginning of a new chapter. He turned back to Emily and her mother. "We have a lot to catch up on," he said quietly, a small smile breaking through his usually serious demeanor. "Years of missed moments, birthdays, first steps, but we'll make up for it, starting now." Her mother nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "We'll do it together," she said. "No more running. No more hiding. We have each other now, and that's what matters." Emily beamed. "Can we go home now?" she asked. "I want to show you my room and my piano at home. I want you to hear the songs I've been practicing." The CEO chuckled softly, his heart swelling with emotion. "I can't wait," he said. "Let's go home and start making new memories." They moved toward the exit together, Emily in the middle, holding both of their hands. The hall staff and a few remaining guests watched quietly, understanding that this was a private moment, one that should not be interrupted. The family walked slowly through the grand hall, their footsteps echoing softly, the weight of years of separation slowly lifting with every step. Outside, the city had been washed clean by the earlier storm. The streets glistened under the streetlights and the air was fresh and cool. The CEO hailed a car and the family stepped inside. Emily pressed her small hands to the window, watching the city pass by. She felt a sense of peace and excitement she had never felt before. Her mother glanced at her, smiling. "You've done something incredible tonight," she said softly. "Not just with your music, but with your heart. You've given us a second chance." Emily looked up at her mother. "I just played the piano," she said. "I didn't know it would do all that." Her mother hugged her tightly. "It's not just the piano," she said. "It's you. You're brave, kind, and full of love. That's what brought us back together." The CEO reached over and gently ruffled Emily's hair. "I've missed so much," he said quietly. "But I promise I will never let that happen again. We'll make every moment count." When they arrived home, Emily ran straight to her piano. She lifted the cover and touched the keys gently as if greeting an old friend. Her mother and father followed her into the room, sitting quietly and watching as she began to play again. The music that filled the house this time was softer, slower yet full of warmth. It was a song of safety, love, and belonging, everything Emily wanted her family to feel. Her mother whispered softly, "You've given us a gift that no one else could. You've given us back our family." The CEO leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes as he listened. "I never realized how much I needed this," he said. "Not the music itself, but the reminder that love never truly disappears, that even when life takes us away from each other, it can bring us back in ways we never imagined." Emily paused for a moment, looking up at them. "Do you want me to play the song from the gala again?" she asked. Her father smiled gently. "Yes," he said. "I want to hear it one more time. For us." She began to play, the familiar melody filling the room with the same tender emotion that had moved so many people earlier that night. Her mother closed her eyes, letting the music wrap around her like a warm embrace. The CEO felt tears streaming down his face. the sound of his daughter's music finally filling the void he had carried for so many years. When the final note faded, the room was quiet except for the soft hum of the piano. Emily looked up at her parents, her small chest rising and falling with excitement and pride. She had done something she didn't fully understand, yet she could feel its significance. Her mother walked over and hugged her tightly. "You've reminded us all what's important," she whispered. "Family, love, courage, and hope." Her father knelt down beside her, taking her small hands in his. "You've done more than anyone could have imagined," he said. "You've given us a future we thought we'd lost forever. And now we have it. Together." Over the next few days, the family began to rebuild their lives. The CEO made time for Emily, attending school events and helping with her piano practice. He and her mother worked through the years of separation, finding forgiveness and understanding in their shared love for their daughter. Emily thrived in the attention and love she had always longed for. Her music continued to grow, becoming not just a way to express herself but a way to connect her family even further. Word of the gala and the little girl's performance spread quietly through the city. People who had attended spoke of the courage and talent of a child who had played with such heart that it brought a family back together. They talked about the emotional reunion that had followed and how it had reminded everyone that even in a world filled with busy schedules and distractions, love and family should always come first. The CEO, once consumed by work and responsibilities, found new meaning in life. He spent more time with Emily and her mother, making up for the years lost and cherishing every small moment. He realized that no achievement, no amount of success could ever compare to the joy of having a family whole and present in his life. Emily's mother also found a sense of peace she had not felt in years. The burden of raising her daughter alone had been heavy, but now she felt supported, loved, and seen. Together with the CEO, they created a home filled with laughter, music, and understanding. The little girl's courage had brought them all back together, and her simple act of playing the piano had changed the course of their lives forever. As months passed, Emily continued to play, each note carrying the love and connection she had nurtured in her family. Her music became a bridge, not just between her parents, but for everyone who heard it. It reminded them that even the smallest acts of courage and kindness could have a profound impact on the people around them. And so, what had started as a nervous performance at a gala had grown into a story of hope and reunion. Emily's music had not only reunited her family, but had also inspired everyone who witnessed it to cherish the people they loved, to act with courage, and to never underestimate the power of a child's heart. The family sat together in their home one evening, the soft glow of the lights casting a warm tone over the room. Emily played her piano, the familiar melody flowing like a river of love and reassurance. Her mother and father listened, holding hands and smiling quietly. The years of separation, the regrets, and the pain had all been transformed by a child's courage and a song that had waited patiently to be heard. The CEO whispered softly, almost to himself, "We've been given a second chance, and this time we won't let it slip away." Emily paused, looking up at him with shining eyes. "I'll keep playing for us," she said. "I'll always play for you." Her mother smiled, tears glistening. "And we'll always be here," she said. Together. The music continued, soft and comforting, filling the home with a sense of peace, love, and promise. The little girl's gift had done more than reunite her family. It had reminded them all, and everyone who knew their story, that love, courage, and hope could endure even the longest years of separation, and that hearts willing to listen and connect could always find their way back to each other. That night, as Emily's melody echoed through the home, a family once divided was finally whole. And in the quiet warmth of their home, surrounded by music and love, they knew that this was only the beginning of a life filled with shared moments, laughter, and the unbreakable bond that had been restored through a little girl's courage, a song, and the power of the heart.